All right, so we are on Monday, November 6th. So there's a whole set of files to download, folks. So we're working with Excel's built-in file dialogues. We're doing some other things kind of relevant to manipulating sets of files today. But what we're doing in class today is going to be directly relevant to what students commonly agree is the most difficult project of the term. That's the database project. So the user forms project is coming up, and the next one is the database modification project. And so just keep that in mind, is that when you get to that project, the stuff we're doing right now, that's going to be a big help. So so you have an extra incentive to pay attention. So go ahead and download that file, get it extracted, and we should have here crime.zip. I've extracted it, I think, already. Yeah, so here it is. It's just called crime. And you don't need to open this up. I'm going to open up one of these files just so we can take a look at what we're dealing with. Maybe I'll give you a little introduction. So we've got, I think, 48 different files here. I'm not sure why we're missing a couple of states. But if I look at one of these, we'll just go ahead and open up, like, Texas. Where's Texas? And so this is crimes known to law enforcement. So this is data that's compiled by the FBI for crimes that happen on university campuses. And I don't know why it takes so long to open. It's not a big file or anything. Opening and protecting. There we go. Enable editing. When you get to the project, and you certainly don't have enough. We didn't even talk about database management yet. But this is the data that you're going to be working with. So you're going to have to, and this is the way the FBI presents it. You want the data from the site, you download it, and here it is. If you want to query this data and find out, which campuses have the highest arson rate, there's no real way to query this. And so the project is going to be to open up these 48 files and read the data out of these and put them into a database so it can be queried. That's where you're headed with this project. I'll tell you now, I'll probably forget to tell this again when we get to the project, but when I came across this data, offenses known to law enforcement, I think is what the data set is called. It was before you could just download it directly. It was like, send us an email if you want the data. So send them an email. The email's the FBI. I want the data. Now, like a week later, a CD shows up. It's like, no charge, just here comes a CD in the mail. The data I was looking for. Thank you. About a week and a half or 2 weeks after that, I got a call. And I have my phone, it has caller ID on it. What did it say? Federal Bureau of Investigation. When the FBI calls you, there's just this little moment where you go, have I done something illegal recently? And I thought, it's one of those calls that doesn't go away if you don't answer. They're going to call, they're going to track, they know how to find me. They really have my number. How do they get my number? I don't know how they got my number. They called me. I said, hello, is this Professor Allen? Yes, Professor Allen. Did we send you a disk with crime data on it recently? I said, yes, I have it right here. He said, that's our original. Could you send it back to us? No problem. More than happy to apply. Intern. I guess there must have been an intern working. Oh, of course, yes. It's okay to have the data. It was just, I guess that's the only one we had. Someone else needed a copy, and we didn't have it anymore. So, all right. So where we're headed today is kind of working with sets of files. Initially, we're going to ask the question, well, how can we allow the user to pick a file to open, or to pick a folder to start to work with? And so that's where we're headed. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So I don't even think we're going to even really work with these files in the fact that they're workbooks. It's just some files that we're going to have, sets of files to work with. All right, so I'm closing that one. I closed all of Excel. Wonderful. Question?
We have the Excel, but we also have the Access file. Are we going to work with Excel or with Access?
Oh, yeah. So the project is going to have you do stuff with Access. But we're not getting there yet. So today is just how do we ask the user which files do you want to open, and how do we kind of work with sets of files, and what are the kind of tools built into Excel for doing this. So we're going to start off with a blank workbook. So it's been a while since we've done that. We're usually downloading something to work with, but now we're starting off just with blank. So open up the, in fact, before we open up anything, let's save it. So we're going to start off, we're going to save it. But the important part here is that we want to save it in the same location where the extracted folder is. Now for me, that folder is called crime. It's on my desktop. So I'm going to save this workbook not inside the crime folder, but in the same location as the crime folder. So where do I save this workbook? Save it to my desktop, so that the file's there, and the folder with all the files is right next to it. They're brother and sister, sitting right next to each other. All right, so File, Save As, Desktop for me, and I will make it an XLSM, and I guess I'll just call it Working with Files. Fall 17. Insert a module. Looking at my Project Explorer for a little while. So here I am. Oh, good thing, because I put it in the wrong place. I don't want a module in FuncRes. Insert module. Make sure that it's in your work, in the file that we just created. All right. So sub. Let's just make this called the folder picker. It's a great word. Picker demo. All right. So this functionality, it's kind of built in. It's really nice. It's nice functionality built into all of the Microsoft Office applications that allows us to just invoke some common dialog boxes. Some dialog boxes are just built in. They're just a part of, it's just a part of the language. It's actually a part of the application itself. And so I'm going to create a variable called FD. It's going to be an object that I can refer to that has methods, properties that will allow me to interact with the user. So dim FD as office dot file dialog. And so the object is the file dialog object. It's part of the Office suite of applications. And that will give me a reference to the object, the ability to have a reference to the object. So when this line gets processed, how much memory am I allocating? I mean, is it a lot of memory? Is it enough memory for everything I need for all the methods and properties of the file dialog? Or is it just an itty-bitty tiny bit, just enough for a memory address? You got someone saying memory address is just a little bit. Anyone saying no, it's more? Okay, it's just a memory address. So this is an object variable. I haven't created the file dialog yet. It's just a variable that will let me refer to a file dialog object. So now we've got to figure out how we're going to refer to it, how we're going to actually create that thing, and here's how we do it. Set FD. Remember set, every time I'm going to bind an object variable onto an object, I use the keyword set, equal to application dot file dialog. Now here's the thing, there's 4 different kinds of file dialogs that we can choose. There's one for picking folders, one for picking files. One that's kind of already set up to say I want to save a file as or to open a file. So when I hit the parenthesis, it should give me those 4 types. There they are. So it can be the file picker, the folder picker, the open dialog, or the save as dialog. And I'm after the folder picker. So the idea here is I want the user to be able to choose a folder, and then once I know the folder that we're working with, I'll process whatever I want to do with that folder. But this is just to give the user a chance to pick a folder. Closing parenthesis, and there we go. So now at this point, I have allocated memory for the object. That object is instantiated in memory. I've bound the variable name, file dialog, onto it so I can refer to it from that file dialog, from the name of the variable name. So let's go ahead and see how we open the dialog. It's really easy. FD dot show. The show method. And so now when I run this procedure, it should show a dialog box that's wired up to pick a folder. press play. Here it is. You'll notice that there are no files here. There are only folders. It's because that's all I can pick. In a sense, it almost would be nice if I could see the files there listed, but maybe they're grayed out or something so I can see them, but that's not the way it works. You just get to see the folders, pick in a folder. And so here I'm going to pick Cassandra. Ooh, Cassandra. Ooh, slides. It's kind of a pity that a great name like Cassandra in my life, it only just means a different kind of database. That's really all it stands for. Say okay. And there we go. So what did it do with that name?
Let you pick it.
Let me pick it. Actually, what it did was it recorded that name in one of the properties of the object. I haven't done anything with it. So in fact, what happens to that object when I get to the end sub? Poof. Yeah. So it realizes, so here's what happens. What happens is, because this is declared, this variable is declared inside this sub procedure, when I get to the end sub, it goes, oh, it was a local variable. It's only available inside this sub procedure. I'm done with this sub procedure. That variable's gone. It releases that variable back to the operating system, and the memory associated goes back into the wild. It's now free and available for anything else. Now, when I've created an object variable and I've bound it to, when I've actually created an object and bound it to an object variable, when the object variable goes out of scope, then in fact the code automatically destroys that object. So it actually frees up the memory associated with that object as well. So it's all gone. So we need to do something before we get to the end. So let's just print it off. Debug.print. Now, it turns out that if you're picking a folder, this folder picker, this object will only ever let you pick one folder at a time. But if I'm picking files, I could tell it, let me pick multiple files. You've seen that, right? You go to open a file, I want to open 4 of these. You hold the control down, click on 4, it opens all 4 of them. So the file picker can do that, the folder picker can't. But it's still the same object, the same underlying object. And so the code here will seem a little bit weird since we can only pick one, but realize other instantiations of this object could pick more than one. So here's how we do it. It is an object, it's a property of the object, so fd dot selected items. It's a collection. It's only going to have one item, so how do I get to it? It's number 1. That should do it. I'm doing a debug.print of that, so we'll have it here in the immediate window. And let's go ahead and run it. I'm going to pick Cassandra Slides. Say OK. And there it is. It printed off the path to that folder that I chose. Oh, that's nice. Okay, I want to make sure that we're running to here. Anyone have a question?
Sorry, can you go over the 1 at the end again?
Ah, okay, yeah. The question is, let me go ahead and let me put a breakpoint right here, and we'll run to this point. Okay, so fd show shows that file dialog, comes up here, and my code pauses. It waits until that file dialog box is closed by the user. And then we come here. So whatever I have selected, it's put them into this property called selected items. It's a collection. Have we talked about collections?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a collection. Oh yeah, we talked about collections. There's lots of collections we've talked about. I don't think we've talked about creating our own collections yet, which we'll probably do today. But it's kind of like an array, but it's actually an object, so it has properties and methods. One of the properties that it has is a count. So the name of this is fd.selectedItems, and I can ask for the count. The count. And it tells me there's only one. And so this is a collection with just one item. The truth is, as long as this is configured as the folder picker, it's only ever going to pick one. It's only ever going to pick one folder. That's all it can ever be. It can be 1, or it can be less than 1, but it can't be more than 1. And so, but if it's files, I can choose multiple. That's why it's a collection instead of just a selected file name or something. Did that get it?
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, so that's how I refer to, in this case, the one that's selected, and just printed it right up there again. Now, now what do we do? Let's do this. I'm going to run it, but now instead of choosing one, well, I'll go ahead and choose that one. Now I'm going to say cancel. How many items should be selected when I hit cancel?
0.
Yeah, there should be none. And so how many? What should be the count of my selected items? It should be 0. So I hit cancel and I get an invalid procedure call or argument. Why?
Because that's not for simple.
Yeah, I'm telling you, look at number 1. How many are there? None. And so it's not a very good error message, in my opinion. Invalid procedure call or argument. In fact, it's an invalid argument. But look at that. It's runtime error 5. This is like one of the first 5 errors they thought of. Number 5.
They just thought it would be the 5th most popular.
No. This is the order they thought of them. I don't know, really, to be truthful. But this is one that's been around a long time. I mean, you've seen that error 1004, which is just like, what is that? It basically means there was an error. Thank you. 1000. This is number 5. All right. So, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? Any thoughts? Yeah, you could check to see if, how many items there are selected. But it turns out FD show, the show method, it will return a value. It returns a value based on whether the user pressed OK or cancel. And so I can tell right here, if fd.show, then do something. So fd.show will return a Boolean value. Remember, I need to have, between the if and the then, something that evaluates it true or false. This method itself evaluates it true or false. If the user presses OK, it's going to be true. If the user presses cancel, it's going to be false. And so now, if I press OK, it prints the name of the folder. If I press cancel, it does not print the name of the folder. Hard to tell because it was already there. I'll try it again. If I press cancel, it does not print the name of the folder, but it doesn't give me an error. And so this is actually a pretty common thing, is to have a function that either succeeds or doesn't succeed, have it return true or false, and then you can test the call to the function in if statement. Questions here? Okay, in-class exercise. I want you to change this from a sub-procedure to a function procedure called getFolderPath. So when you call getFolderPath, it should return either the path that the user selected, or it should return a zero-length string. How long do you think you need for this?
30 minutes?
30 minutes? That's a little much. Why don't we do 1/10 of that? Let's try 3 minutes. We'll pause the recording. All right, so if I'm going to change this to be a function, first thing I'm going to change function. And of course, I've got to go ahead and change it to end function. Oh, that was easy. Now, if I don't tell it what type to return, what's it going to return? Variant. Yeah, the default data type, variant. I prefer this to return a string. Truth is, it would work okay as a variant, but I'm going to have this return a string. And so now, instead of printing the name of instead of printing what was selected, I will just set the name of the function equal to what was selected, and now that will send back the value. So now I should be able to come here to my media window and say I want to print getFolderPath. Hit enter. It puts that path up. I choose whichever one I want, and then it just prints it. So the function. So the question that came up earlier was, well, where do you want to return it to? Do you want to return it to a cell or return it to another message or something? And the answer is the function doesn't know about where it's going to be used. So the function just sends the value back, and it's up to me to decide what to do with the results. Right? So I can do it with a message box. MSG box, call the function. When I hit enter, it's trying desperately to show the message box, but it can't show the message box until it finds out what the answer, what get folder path evaluates. So it has to display that one first. I then pick a folder, and then it can display that here. All right, it could say active cell.value equals get folder path, same thing. Then it would go into the cell. All right. So what I'd like to do now is I would like to say, how can we get all the files in that folder and then put them in some kind of list so we can process through them one at a time? And so that's what you're going to have to do in this project. So let's go ahead and solve that part of the project, thus making the project a little bit easier. Though even with this, it'll probably still be the hardest project of the term. All right, so work with file list. All right, so we declare a variable called path. It will be a string. Now, I would like to allow the user to choose the path where the files are. I've got some program that's going to process through a whole potload of files. I want the user to be able to tell me where those files are. And so, that's going to be easy. How do I do it? So at this point, how do I say that? Well, I don't just say get folder path. I have to say path equals get folder path. Put the parentheses on the end or not. It doesn't matter. Probably better to put them on the end. That way when someone looks at it, they know it's a function, not just a variable name. Okay, so then at this point, I will have a valid path in my path variable. Or else I'll have what? If it's not a valid path, there's only one other thing it could be. It could be an invalid, it could be a not valid path. It's a very specific not valid, it's true, but it's a very specific not valid path. What will it be? So only one other thing it can be. What's that?
Empty.
Yeah, a zero-length string. So an empty string. Because what's going to happen down here if the user hits cancel? So we're calling get folder path. We're opening that file dialog. We're showing the file dialog. What's going to happen right here if the user hits cancel?
That'll be false.
This will be false. And so we're going to skip this one, and we're going to go right here, and we're done. Why does it return a zero-length string? Default value for any string variable, for each string expression, default value. So that's what it's going to return if we don't actually get a path. And so I should probably do this. I should probably say if path is a zero-length string, then exit sub. The user said cancel, we're done. Just get me out of here. Otherwise, we'll continue processing the set of files they gave us to do. User must have pressed cancel, or tapped, or clicked, or whatever we do these days. Okay, so at this point now, I know I've got a valid path. What I'd like to do is I would like to read all the files out of that path. Or maybe I just want to read the Excel files out of that path. I don't want to read all the files, just the Excel files. And so, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to declare another variable, two more variables. I'm going to declare one called file name as a string, and one called files as a new collection. I don't think we've done this before. We have worked with existing collections, collections of shapes, collections of worksheets, collections of cells, collections of workbooks. They're all here. All those objects have a count method. They'll tell us how many there are. Most of them have a create method. We can add a new one. Now, what we can do is we can create a collection object that has that same set of properties. This object, files, is going to have a count method. We can just refer to it. And so we now we've created a new object, and it's a collection. So here's what we're going to do. We want to read all the files that match a certain criteria from the folder the user gave us. And we want to put those files into the We want to put the full path to those files in the files folder. Question?
Why not just use an array? Like when you use an array versus a collection?
Question is, why not use an array? The answer is that we could use an array. Would we want to use a fixed length array or a dynamic array? Static array or dynamic array? It should be a dynamic array because we don't know how many files are going to be there. We don't even know what folder the user is going to choose. So it would be a dynamic array, in which case, after they chose it, we would have to go find out how many files there are there, and then redim the array to that size, and then load that array up. The nice thing about the collection is that the collection will let me just say, I don't know how many there's going to be, but I can just very efficiently add one on each time we go. So when I have just like one set, it's not 2, 3, or 4 dimensions, the collection is typically easier to work with than a single dimension array. All right. Oh boy. How many of you are like comfortable working with the command prompt? Oh, it's like 7. This part that we're about to do, you don't have to actually open the command prompt, but to understand the statement, I want you to see how we used to have to live. I'm just going to open up the command prompt here on my computer, CMD. Ooh. That used to be what computers looked like. It's like before you were born. You turned the computer on, and that was it. There's no pictures. There's no graphics. You're wondering, what do I have on this computer? I would ask for a directory of what's on this computer, and it would list off whatever files are in that particular location. Actually, the very first time I ever used the dir command, it was on an operating system called CPM. You didn't even have folders. What do you want a folder for? I mean, probably only going to have, at most 100 files ever on this computer. So, but when they made DOS, they have now folders. So here we get folders as well as files. This is kind of boring. Where am I? Gallen2. I'm going to change directories, CD, and I'm going to go, ooh, I have a music. I didn't even know I had a music folder. There's probably nothing in it. I have 3D objects. I don't know. Where did this stuff come from? Maybe Oracle has something interesting in it. Oracle, and then dir again. There's another directory. That's bad. CD, go upward. I'm going to go upward a level. ... That takes me up a directory. Folks, you don't have to learn this stuff. I'm just snooping around. Let me find my C. I probably have a desktop on here, don't I? CD, desktop, dir. Ah, there's all my stuff. I should be able to go to crime from here. There's all the files that I'm after. This will seem strange to you. But back in the early days when we'd say dir, literally, you could read the files as they went by. It was so slow, you had time to read them as they were scrolling past. we got a new computer. I typed dir. It went by too fast. How do I know what's there? Oh, you can tell it to stop too. But anyway, okay. So, well, what if I don't want to see all of these? What if I only want the ones that start with an M? I could say dir M star. Now I have just the ones that start with an M. If I want to see just the ones that start with an M and then have an X and then have a dot and then an X, I could say dir M star dot X star. So you kind of have this whole ability to these wildcards to say, which files am I interested in? Actually, that's all of them. These all are XLSX files, so that won't be any more interesting.
If there were documents in there,
that's right. If there were,
put an A in front of that.
Let's do this. Oh, you have to like this. Copy from the console. Copy con test.doc. Hi there. Control Z. There's now test.doc. So I can now also say dir star dot C, I get just that one, or star dot X star, and I get only the ones that have a dot in their next. So you have some kind of ability to say, out of all these files, find the ones that match this particular pattern. And most commonly, what you're interested in is, I want dir star dot doc. Give me all the doc files. Give me all the xlsx files. Or give me all the xls star files. What would that be a pretty good, what's that a pretty good one to ask for?
Excel.
Yeah, Excel files. Whether it's xlsx or xlsm or xlsb, there's another one, xlsb. That would be a pretty good job of getting that. Okay, so this goes back to the early days of computing, but you're about to see this now in VBA. So let's go back to our VBA code. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to say, and this is my immediate window, dir. I'm not quite sure what we'll do if we just do dir. I got to tell it where I want to look. Well, I want to look at ccolp. In this case, let's just do this, dir, and let me put get folder path here. What is that going to do? What's that?
It's going to read in the value we have from that function and look for a folder with that name and address.
Yeah, pretty close. So that's right. Before I can do the dir, it's got to figure out what get folder path does. So it's going to put up the dialog box. It's going to ask me to pick a folder. And then it's going to feed the result of that to dir. So I'm going to pass some valid path to the dir function. Now, dir just gives me, it just allows me to access the files in the file system at that location. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to pick my crime folder. I'm going to say OK. And this next part's going to be a little bit weird. Say OK. And it's going to return just one file. Not even a very good one. Maybe I have to put a... Oh, that's right. When I do the dir, it's not just enough to say the folder path. I also have to give it, like, the wildcard as well. So I want get folder path concatenated with \star.xlsx. I hope that's right. Crime. Okay. There we go. So, dir is a little bit weird. Dir will give me the first file that meets the wildcard that I've given it. So I told it to look at that particular location, wherever the user picked, show me the first file that has any file name and has a .xlsx. And so I want to do something just like that down here in my code. Now I want the user to pick the folder we're working with. In fact, I think they already do, right? Because we're saying path equals get folder path. So now I'm going to say debug dot, I'm going to say file name equals dir path concatenated with. Now, I need to put that \/ on it because you'll notice that when I say get folder path, it doesn't bring the terminating \/ here. And so I need to add that on. I can do that in a couple of ways. I could just put the \/ on as a string, or I could use this application. Oops, I'm going to have to comment this out for a moment to show it in the immediate window. Application dot path separator. It also is a \. But the difference here is that all this stuff that we're doing, this dir and the Office file dialog box, this all works in the Mac version of Excel. But here's the problem. The problem is the path separator character is different in Mac than it is in Windows. And so if I put the \, in, this would only work in Windows. But if instead of putting a \, I just put the expression here that asks for what the file path separator is, then it will put the right one in for the operating system. We're not going to do very much in class to kind of talk about developing for the Mac versus Windows. Most of what we're doing will just work on the Mac side. But this is really here to tell you there are some things that are different. And mostly when there's something different, the folks who built the language, the environment said, you know what, we want to make that easy for them. And so we created a property that will just return the proper character to use in that situation. And star.xlsx. And this will bring back one file. Debug.print file name. File name equals dir. And I'm going to do that a bunch of times. This part is a little bit weird, I'm going to have to admit. When I make a call to dir and I pass it a path, with wildcard on the end, it says, great, give me that whole list, and reads that whole list. And it gives me back the first one. If I make a subsequent call to dir without telling it where to look, it brings back the next one. It remembers the last list that it made here, and this will give me the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And so this should print the first several files from that location. With file list, prime. So it's printed Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California. So it's gone through and done that. Now, of course, the whole point here is I don't know how many files are going to be there. So how do I know how many times to copy this code down? What do? I probably need a loop for this. So let's go ahead and make a loop. So instead of doing all of these, I'm going to do and loop. Don't run it yet. We got a problem. Debug.print file. So I think I want these in the opposite direction. So I'm going to first set the file name here, and then I'm going to do a debug.print of that file name, and then I'm going to get the next file name. Come back to the top, print the one I just got, get the next one. Come back to the top, print the one I just got, get the next one. All right. So how do we ever get out of this thing?
Do until.
Until something. Okay, until what?
Zero length string.
Aha, very good. That is the bright corner up there. So
I'm copying.
you're copying off someone in front. Turns out that here's what happens, is that dir continues to read, when you call dir without giving it an argument, it continues to return the next file until what? Until it runs out of files. And then how does it tell you it's out of files? It returns a zero-length string. So I'm going to do, actually I'll do it this way. I'm going to do while, no, I'll do until, that's good. Do until dir is equal to a zero-length string. And so now, even if whatever folder the user picked doesn't have any XLSX files in it, it will now give me, it'll just bypass this, right? Because dir will start off as a zero-length string. So now I should be able to run this, pick my folder, and get an invalid procedure call. All the way to Wisconsin.
File name.
Oh, yeah, not dir until file name equals that. Thank you. Yeah, that's the whole point. We're reading the file name here. We want to do until the file name. Yes, we should have. Actually, we missed the first one. Is Alabama the first one on that list?
Yeah, but Alaska is the second.
Oh, we missed Alaska.
We're missing every other one.
Yeah, it's every other.
Ah, right, because we had an extra dir. We had 2 dirs in there. Right, so yes, thank you very much. So we're reading the file name. We want to know, is that file name blank? If it is, get us out of here. If it's not, print it. And then get the next one. Is it blank? Nope, print it. Is it blank? Nope, print it. Is it blank? Nope, print it. Is it blank? Yep. Ah, we're done. So let's try that again. There we go. No error this time. Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, and so on. So now we've got a loop that's going across that set of files, and it gives us control to each one of those file names individually. Questions? Help getting this code to run. We're going to build on this example, so if you need help, now's the time. Yeah? So now, at this point, we just have the file names flying across the screen. We want to put them somewhere a little more permanent. And so, instead of printing them, or at the same time as printing them, we're going to say, we want to put these in the collection called files. So files dot, oh, look at that. It's got 4 methods. Which one do we want? Add. Files dot add, and what are we going to add? File name. So now we're going to add those items into that collection. I'm going to put a breakpoint here just before the end sub and run this, just so I can play around with that collection while it's still in memory. So now I should be able to say, I want to see files sub 1. There it is. Files sub 50. Oh, there's not 50, 48 I think in this list, so 30. New York. Wonderful. So in that sense, I refer to these very much like I might refer to them as an array. Name of the collection, and then an index number indicating which one I'm after. The key is, though, is that collections are always 1 based. So they start with 1, not 0. Okay. One more thing I'd like to do in this example, and that is, instead of having just the name of the file, I would like to have the full path to that file. So I could just say I want to open whatever is in that particular, whatever's in files 30, I just want to open that. So what do I do?
Instead of add files.add file name, it would be files.add get folder path.
Okay, so if I put get folder path here, what's it going to do?
It's going to ask you for
Yeah, get folder path is going to ask the user for each one of these files, hey, what folder do you want? What folder do you want? What folder? Say that 48 times. It would be annoying. I already told you what folder I want right up here.
So it's going to be path.
Right. Path and application.path separator and file. And so now, if I look into files sub 30, it should be the full path to that particular file. Questions? So one of the things we haven't talked much about yet is how do you know when to break up a sub-procedure into multiple sub-procedures? Let's suppose I had to open and process every one of those files. This is what you have to do for the project. Could I just do it right here? Yeah, I can just start opening. I've got a collection now. I can start iterating across that collection. But to me, what's a great way to separate this is to say, listen, I've got this procedure that just figures out which files I'm going to process. It gets them all queued up and ready to go. Then what I'd like to do is I'd like to just say, you know what, give me another procedure that just processes one of these things. And then I'll call that procedure and send it one path and let it just do one. And so, here's what I'm going to do. Go ahead and stop this. Let's make another sub-procedure here called process one file. I'm going to accept some file path as a string. And so after I've built this collection, I'm just going to iterate across it. I'll probably want, give me a little variable up here, just a control variable. Give him x as an integer. For x equals, help me out with this for loop. I want to go across all of the files in my collection that I just created.
X equals 0 to
Yeah, 1 to files.count. Remember, collections are, in VBA, collections are 1 based. And so now I'm just going to call process 1 file. And I'm going to pass it files sub x. First time through, it'll pass it files sub 1, then files sub 2, then files sub 3. And that will be received, that variable that I'm passing here will be received into one called file path. So down here I should be able to say workbooks.open file path. That's going to then be the active workbook. So I could close, do whatever I want to do, then I could close it by saying active workbook.close. But anytime I've got a workbook open and I'm closing it programmatically, I want to be really sure that I'm closing the right one. In this case, it's going to open it, and then I've got other workbooks open. It's going to open, it's going to do some stuff, and then close it. What happens if, while this is running, and this is going to be something that might take a few minutes to run, what if the user goes, hey, I wonder what's going on in my other workbook, and they click on a different workbook while that's running, what's going to happen? It's going to close that workbook, because the active workbook is going to close that active workbook. So watch this. The open method of the workbooks collection returns a reference to the workbook that it opened. So I can do this, dim WB as a workbook. So that's just an object variable just going to hold a memory location. And then I could say set WB equal to workbooks.open. Now that I'm doing something with the return value of the workbooks.open method, I've got to put parentheses around the argument list. So now instead of active workbook.close, I can just say workbook.close. Thank you. Save changes, colon equals false. Save changes. So in here I would have the code that does whatever I have to do with that file. In the case of the project, open the file, read across it, find out how much arson was committed at Texas A&M University in the year 2012. Write that to the database, then find out how much arson was committed at University of Texas, and so forth. A bunch of stuff you'll have to do here. And again, we haven't gotten to that part yet. This is just the structural part for this project. But now, if I run this, it'll be a little bit annoying. Maybe I should put do events inside this loop in case I want to stop it. Now when I run this, it should process through all of those files. There we are. Can you see it? Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia. It's opening them up and then closing it back down. Won't take all that long. Go back to the code in case there's any questions while it's running. That doesn't help. You can keep up. No. Questions? Got through them all.
You scroll.
All right, got a couple more demonstrations to do, but this is really kind of the starting of that project. Wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of start with this structure and say, hey, I'm ready to, this is where I'm going to start from the project from what we've gotten right here. Question?
What if you know the path of the folder you want to open? You want to open multiple folders. You just, where would you put that in?
Say the question again.
I'll ask later.
You want to open multiple folders?
Yeah, and you know the file path to them already.
So, do you know what folders are in the path?
Yes.
So you don't need to ask it?
Yeah.
Then you would just open them, you would just specify multiple statements that say open with the full file path specified. But it does bring up one more interesting thing on the dir statement. Dir right, so here's the path name that I'm looking for. This workbook. This workbook dot. Oh, by the way, for the project, you're not actually going to ask the user what the path is. The path is specified. It's going to actually work from wherever the current workbook is. So you'll have to read this workbook.path to be able to get it. Anyway, that's specified in the assignment. Okay, so I'm going to say dir, and I'm going to pass it \star. That should give me everything. It should give me one file for everything. Appointment.txt. Now, the problem is that there are folders here as well. How do I tell it? No. I don't want to see files. I want to see folders. I want my dir statement to bring back the names of other folders. Right now, it's just bringing back files. Well, there's another argument. And so I can tell it directory, VB directory. Just bring back the names of directories. And now that brings back a directory. The dot is a shortcut for the current directory. 2 dots is a shortcut for the directory above, and then it would have multiple directories. So if you're interested in processing directories, you tell it, I'm not asking for files, I'm asking for directories. When you ask. Question?
If you go down to your process of procedure, you process file path as string. Is that where you just you establish the variable right there?
Right. So we're using file path here. We're going to open file path, and here's where I'm declaring the variable. When I declare a variable inside the parentheses of the sub procedure or the function procedure, it's a special kind of variable called a parameter. And how does it get its value? How does file path get assigned its value?
File is called.
That's right. Whenever I call process one file, now it's expecting to have a value sent to it. I'm sending it file sub x, and so whatever is in file sub x will now become the value for file path. And then I open file path, it'll be whatever value I pass down. You can think of this as like the doorway that gets this value down into this procedure. Bucket. Dump it into a bucket called file path, and then you can refer to it by that file name, by that variable name inside. Right, let's go back down to the very first example we did. I wanted to make sure that we got at least that far to help you on the project. Now a little bit more with the Office file dialog. So instead of a folder, I'm going to copy the folder picker demo and I'm changing it to the file picker demo. Instead of the MSO file dialog folder picker, it will be the file picker.
We change this to a function. Should it say a function or not?
No, this is just a sub. Oh, you changed yours? Function instead of copying it and making a.
Maybe I just rewrote it.
So once we're working with folders, there's not a whole lot to choose from. You can only choose one file, and it doesn't make sense to put a. Well, you might be able to. I've never thought of that. Because you could name a folder like workbook.xlsm. That's a valid name for a folder. Don't do that. But you can do that. So I guess you could have folders with extensions that you could use for filtering and so forth. But with files, there's a couple more interesting things. So what we want to see here is, what if I only want users to be able to pick an Excel workbook? Here's what we have to do. After we have told it that we're creating it, between when we create the object and when we show the dialog box, we have some configuration that we can do. And so in here, I'm going to say fd dot. And if we look down, there's a property called filters. So the filters are going to allow me to specify which files I want to be able to allow, to actually to be able to see when the user is looking around for files. So filters equals, and this is a string, I think, filters dot. Oh no, filters dot add. So we will add, calling the add method, and then we're going to give it several arguments. So the first argument is, what does the user see when what gets displayed when this is the filter that's chosen? And so I'm going to put here, let's just start off with text files. Text files. So this, whatever I put in here has nothing to do with actually what's displayed, with which files are visible. It's just a description to the user of which files are visible. And so it's kind of common to say I also want to specify in here what the wildcard is, star.txt. That star.txt is just text to show to the user. It has nothing to do with which files are actually displayed. That's the next parameter. So extensions, I'm going to put in here as just txt. I hope that's the right way. And then that should be all we need to do there. So that should now be another filter that's available on that particular file dialog. So let me make sure I've got a file. Copy test.txt. Okay, so now I do have a txt file in that same location. I should be able to run this. Might need a little help on this. Don't need a position. All right, so we have to have the star dot in here, star.txt, and it turns out we don't really need this in here because Excel is going to put that on for us automatically. So now when I run this, it will come up with, it still shows it twice. It's a little bit disturbing. Let me cancel that. Text file, make sure I stock my code. Delightful. Still shows it both times. Oh. Somehow I managed to add it twice. Okay, so that just makes me think that this thing isn't actually dying in between runs. So let's clear those filters off. fd.filters .clear, and then we will add star.txt, and we'll add star.doc, we'll add star.xlsx. Word files, Excel files. There's a way that I can actually put more than one filter in here. I don't know if you have to separate with a comma or a semicolon. We'll play with that in just a second. And so now, all of those options are here. I choose the one and it shows the right one. If I want all of these to show up in that order, but I want Excel files to be the selected one, there's a thing called the filter index. So we can set the filter index. Cancel that. fd.filterindex. I'm guessing that it's one base, which would make that the number 3 index. Let's find out. Yeah, so now Excel files comes up as the default.
Word files, you want to be .goc or .gocx?
Oh, actually, I'm going to put it as .doc star, and that way, whether it's an old Word file or a new one, that'll come up okay. I think when I created it, I put it as a .doc. Yeah, that file actually has a .doc extension, even though it's really a text. So you can play with the filters to get that configured as to where you want to, what you want to show. Questions? There are a bunch of other properties. You can specify, where you want when it opens, where does it open to, what folder does it start with? Will it start at the My Documents folder or whatever, but there are lots of other configuration properties for the file picker. Anything else? All right.